The council chamber stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 47 different species. Ambassador Minjai sat in the human section, a modest area near the back where the lighting was softer than most species preferred. She watched Chairman Vexthor move across the raised platform, his scales catching the bright lights as he gestured with his clawed hands. "The proposal is simple," Vexthor announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "We redirect funds from low-priority programs to military development. The border regions require stronger protection." Minjay glanced at her tablet. The low-priority programs included medical outreach to frontier worlds, agricultural development on struggling colonies, and mediation services for minor disputes. Humans ran most of these programs. They had been running them for 50 years, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council. 50 years of quiet work, 50 years of filling roles that other species found beneath them. A Talixian representative raised one of her 4 arms. "What about the plague response on my home world? Human doctors contained it last year. The monitoring programs are still active." Vexthor's expression showed something close to amusement. "The plague is contained, as you said. We can reallocate those resources to more pressing needs. Your own medical staff can handle monitoring." The Talixian sat back down, though she did not look convinced. Minjay had seen this pattern many times before. The council saw immediate problems and immediate solutions. They never looked at the slow, careful work that prevented problems from starting. Human mediators kept a dozen border disputes from becoming wars. Human agricultural experts prevented famines before they began. Human doctors built health networks that caught diseases early. But none of this seemed important to species focused on military strength and trade dominance. "The human delegation wishes to speak," Minjai said, standing. Her voice was calm, as it always was. Vexthor nodded, though his body language suggested impatience. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Minjai." "We understand the security concerns," Minjai began. "However, we must note that prevention programs save lives and resources. The medical monitoring on Talix A4 costs very little, but prevents epidemic spread. Our mediation services have resolved 43 disputes this year alone, before they required military intervention." A Kryn counselor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Ambassador, your species has always been concerned with small matters, but we face real threats. Military preparation cannot wait while we count crops and counsel arguing neighbors." Other species murmured agreement. Minjai saw the pattern in their eyes. They thought humans were weak, soft, too concerned with feelings and cooperation to understand harsh realities. They did not understand that preventing a war was harder than fighting one. They did not see that building relationships took more strength than building weapons. "We will accept the Council's decision," Minjai said quietly. "But we ask that this body consider the long-term consequences of these budget cuts." The vote came quickly. 42 species voted yes, 2 voted no, 3 abstained, including the Talixians. The human vote against the measure hardly seemed to matter. Vexthor looked satisfied as he recorded the results. "The measure passes. Resources will be redirected beginning next quarter. Are there other matters to discuss?" Minjay remained standing. "The human delegation has one more statement." Vexthor's scales rippled with annoyance, but he could not refuse. "Proceed." "Humanity has served on this council for 50 years, Minjai said. Her voice remained steady, but something in her tone made several representatives look up. "We have always believed in the Council's mission of cooperation and mutual benefit. However, today's vote suggests that our understanding of cooperation may differ from the majority view." She paused, choosing her words with care. "Therefore, humanity will reevaluate our participation in Council programs and initiatives. We will, of course, fulfill all existing obligations, and provide proper notice for any changes to our commitments." The chamber fell quiet. Several species exchanged glances, but most looked confused or unconcerned. Vexthor waved a clawed hand dismissively. "If humanity feels the need to reconsider its priorities, that is your right. This council will continue its important work regardless." Minjay bowed slightly, the human gesture of formal respect. She gathered her tablet and materials, then walked toward the exit. Her assistant, a younger human named Ji Wu, fell into step beside her. "They don't understand," Ji Wu whispered as they left the chamber. "They think you were just expressing frustration." "I know," Minjay replied. "They will understand eventually, but by then it will be too late." They walked through the corridors of the council building, passing representatives from dozens of species. Some nodded politely to Minjay. Most ignored her completely. Humans had become part of the background, as common and unremarkable as the air recyclers. That was exactly the problem. Back in the human delegation offices, Minjay activated her secure communication system. The faces of human coordinators appeared on multiple screens. Dr. Su Yan from Talix IV, agricultural specialist Hyun Woo from the outer colonies, trade negotiator HFY from the commercial sectors, dozens of others. "You all saw the vote," Minjay said. "Begin withdrawal procedures. 90 days notice for all positions and programs, as per our agreements. Train local replacements where possible. Document everything. And do it all with dignity." Su Yan's face showed sadness. "The plague protocols on Talix IV require constant attention. 3 months isn't enough time to properly train replacements." "Do your best," Minjay replied. "We cannot force them to value our work. We can only choose whether to continue offering it." The faces on the screens showed a mixture of emotions: frustration, disappointment, but also understanding. They had all felt it, the constant dismissal of their efforts, the assumption that their work was simple, unimportant, easily replaced. "Will they realize what they're losing?" Hyun Woo asked. Minjay thought about Vexthor's dismissive gesture, about the laughter when she had spoken of prevention and mediation. She thought about 50 years of quiet, patient work that had held this fractious council together. "Yes," she said finally, "they will realize, but we will not be there to fix the damage when they do." Dr. Su Yan checked the medical monitoring station one last time. The screens showed disease patterns across Talix IV, tracking infection rates, immune responses, and potential outbreak locations. She had built this system over 3 years, working with local medical staff to create something that could catch epidemics before they spread. "You don't need to check it again," her assistant Kenji said gently. "The Talixian staff knows the procedures." "They know the basic procedures," Su Yan corrected. "But there are subtle patterns they haven't learned to recognize yet. It takes years of experience to see the warning signs." She had tried to compress 3 years of training into 3 months. The Talixian doctors were smart and dedicated, but they thought the system was just about collecting data. They did not understand that the real skill was in reading the data, seeing the tiny changes that meant something was starting. Governor Thexin entered the medical center, his 4 arms carrying gifts, the Talixian tradition for farewells. "Dr. Su Yan, we prepared a ceremony for your departure tomorrow." "That's very kind," Su Yan replied. She liked Thexin. He had always supported her work, even when his own government questioned the expense of constant monitoring. "I still do not understand why you are leaving," Thexin said. "The plague is contained. Your work here has been remarkable. Surely you deserve rest, not exile." Su Yan smiled sadly. "We're not leaving because we're tired, Governor. We're leaving because we're no longer wanted in the way that matters." Thexin's confusion was obvious in his body language. "But the Council values human contributions," The council values results, Su-Yan replied. They don't value the daily work that creates those results. They see the plague is contained and think the job is finished. They don't understand that containment requires constant effort. She did not say what she was thinking. That within a year, maybe less, the monitoring would become irregular. The Talixian staff would skip days when nothing seemed urgent. And when the plague resurged, as it inevitably would, they would wonder why the human systems had failed. They would not realize that systems only work when people maintain them. Across council space, similar conversations were happening. Agricultural specialist Hyun Woo walked through the crop fields on Colony World Tarsus, explaining soil rotation to local farmers one final time. They nodded politely, but he could see they thought his methods were old-fashioned. Too slow. They wanted faster yields, not his careful attention to soil health. The nutrients will deplete if you plant the same crops every season, he explained again. It might seem fine for a year or two, but then you'll see yields drop dramatically. We have fertilizers, one farmer replied. Modern solutions. Hyun Woo did not argue further. He had learned over the past months that people rarely believed warnings about slow disasters. They only believed in immediate problems. Trade negotiator Cha closed her office in the commercial sector of Station Praxis. She had spent 8 years here, managing agreements between species that barely tolerated each other. The Vryn and the Heptari had nearly gone to war twice. Both times, Cha had found compromises that let both sides save face while backing down. The station commander, a Vryn named Caxil, stopped by as she packed her belongings. The Heptari are already making noise, he said bluntly. Without you here to calm things down, we might have real problems. Then find a new mediator, Cha replied. We tried. No one wants the position. Other species say it's beneath them to spend time managing our arguments. Cha sealed the last container of her possessions. Perhaps that's something your people should consider, Commander. Humans have been doing work that others considered beneath them for 50 years. When we're gone, someone will need to do it. Caxil's scales darkened, a sign of concern. The Heptari won't negotiate with me directly. They say I'm too aggressive. Then learn to be less aggressive, Cha suggested, or find someone both sides trust. That's what diplomacy is, Commander. It's not grand treaties and dramatic negotiations. It's daily conversation, built trust, and patient listening. She left Station Praxis the next morning. Behind her, the Vryn and Heptari representatives were already arguing over trade routes. Ambassador Min Jae received reports from across council space. Hundreds of humans were withdrawing, all with proper 90-day notices, all with professional courtesy. Medical teams, agricultural advisors, trade negotiators, conflict mediators, aid workers, teachers, cultural liaisons. The list went on and on. Most council species barely noticed. A few sent polite thank you messages. None seemed concerned about filling the gaps. Jiwoo compiled the final numbers for Minjai. We're withdrawing from over 40,000 positions, he said quietly. I didn't realize how many humans were working throughout council space. Most people didn't, Minjae replied. That was the problem. Our work was invisible because it prevented problems rather than solving them dramatically. She thought about a conversation she'd had with Chairman Vex Thor the previous week. He had actually seemed annoyed that humanity was following through on withdrawal. You're being childish, he had said, making a statement because one vote didn't go your way. Minjae had remained calm. We're not making a statement, Chairman. We're respecting the Council's priorities. You voted to defund prevention and mediation programs. We're simply accepting that decision and withdrawing from work that is no longer valued. Vex Thor had waved this away. You'll come back when you realize how much you benefit from council membership. But that was where he was wrong. Humanity did benefit from the council, but not nearly as much as the council benefited from humanity. Humans had joined hoping to learn from advanced species. Instead, they had spent 50 years teaching those species how to cooperate with each other. Now, as the last groups of humans prepared to leave their positions, Minjae felt a deep sadness. Not for humanity. They would be fine. Human worlds would continue thriving, and freed from council obligations, humans could focus on building their own communities. She felt sad for the council, for the wars that would start without mediators, for the plagues that would spread without monitoring, for the famines that would come without proper agricultural planning, for the 1,000 small disasters that humans had been quietly preventing. On her final day at council headquarters, Minjae recorded a message to be delivered to all member species. "Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for 50 years of membership," she said, her voice formal but kind. "We withdraw now with no bitterness, only the hope that all species will find prosperity and peace. We wish you well in your future endeavors." She did not say what she thought, that they would need more than wishes. They would need someone to do the work that humans had done, and she doubted they would find anyone patient enough to try. The first reports seemed unrelated and minor. Chairman Vexthor barely glanced at them during his morning briefings. A plague resurgence on Talix 4, a border dispute heating up between the Vryn and Heptari, crop failures on several colony worlds, normal problems that the Council dealt with regularly. "Send medical supplies to Talix 4, he ordered his assistant, "and schedule a meeting with the Vryn and Heptari representatives." His assistant, a young Kryn named Shalix, hesitated. "Chairman, the Talixian governor specifically requested a human medical team. He says the monitoring systems are showing patterns that local doctors don't understand." "The humans are gone," Vexthor replied irritably. "The Talixians will have to manage with their own staff. They're perfectly capable." But the reports from Talix 4 grew worse over the following weeks. The plague that Dr. Suyan had contained was spreading again. It had jumped to 3 neighboring systems. The Talixian medical staff insisted they were following all the protocols, running the monitoring systems exactly as trained. Governor Thexan sent a personal message to the council. "We need help. The disease is mutating faster than we can track. Dr. Suyon said this might happen, but she also said the monitoring system would give us early warning. We're seeing the warnings now, but we don't know what they mean." Vexthor assigned a team of Kryn medical specialists to investigate. They returned with a puzzling report. "The monitoring system is functioning correctly," the lead specialist said, "but it's generating data that requires interpretation. The Talixians are collecting information but not analyzing it properly. They're missing subtle patterns." "Then teach them to see the patterns," Vexthor ordered. "Chairman, these patterns require years of experience to recognize. The human doctor built expertise over decades of plague research. We can't transfer that knowledge in a few weeks." Vexthor dismissed the concern. "They'll learn through experience. Next issue." But experience came at a terrible cost. By the time Talixian doctors learned to read the warning signs, 20,000 people had died. The Vryn Heptari situation deteriorated even faster. Without HA to mediate, both sides reverted to aggressive posturing. The trade route dispute escalated to military buildups. Council attempts to negotiate failed repeatedly. Commander Caxil, the Vryn station commander, tried to explain the problem to the council. Ambassador Acha understood both our cultures. She knew when we were genuinely angry versus when we were just making political statements. She could find compromises that let us both maintain honor. "Surely your own diplomats can manage this," a council mediator replied. "Our diplomats are trained to win negotiations, not build relationships," Caxil said bluntly. The human approach was different. She spent 8 years earning trust from both sides. You can't replace that with a new mediator. The council tried anyway. 3 different species attempted to mediate the Vryn Heptari dispute. All failed. The situation spiraled toward war. The agricultural problems were slower to emerge, but ultimately more widespread. Hyunwoo's warnings about soil depletion proved accurate. Colony worlds that had abandoned crop rotation saw yields drop by 30%. Some dropped by 50%. The human methods were too slow, colony administrators complained to the council. We needed faster production. And now you have no production, a council agricultural advisor replied coldly. The humans were managing long-term soil health. Without that, you've exhausted your farmland. 14 colony worlds faced potential famine. The council scrambled to ship food supplies, draining resources that were already stretched thin by other crises. In the council chambers, emergency sessions became routine. Representatives argued over how to address multiple simultaneous problems. The cooperative atmosphere that had once characterized the council disappeared. Species blamed each other for failures. Old grudges resurfaced. Chairman Vexthor struggled to maintain order. His authoritative style, which had seemed strong when things were stable, now appeared rigid and uncompromising. He tried to command cooperation, but cooperation couldn't be commanded. It had to be built carefully over time. That was something humans had understood. A young analyst named Kai, assigned to the Vryn Diplomatic Corps, began noticing patterns. She stayed late in her office, comparing current crises with historical records. The data troubled her deeply. The plague on Talix IV had been contained for 6 years before humans left. Now it was spreading again. The Vryn Heptari dispute had been managed peacefully for 8 years before humans left. Now both sides were preparing for war. Colony agricultural problems had been minimal before humans left. Now famines loomed. Kai pulled up personnel records, searching for the common factor. The answer was obvious once she looked. Human staff had been involved in all these areas, not in leadership positions, but in steady, daily work. Monitoring diseases, mediating disputes, advising on crops. She compiled her findings into a report and presented it to her supervisor, senior diplomat Thaxor. The humans were holding things together, Kai said, displaying her data. They held thousands of positions across council space. Most were in support roles that other species considered beneath them. Medical monitoring, agricultural advising, low-level mediation. We didn't notice their work because it was preventing problems, not solving dramatic crises. Thaxor studied the numbers with growing unease. How many positions? Over 40,000, Kai replied. And the problem started in every area where humans withdrew. This is concerning, Thaxor admitted. But surely we're just experiencing an adjustment period. We built this council before humans joined. We can maintain it after they leave. Kai wanted to argue. She wanted to point out that the council before humans had been much smaller and less stable, that humans hadn't just participated in the council, they had become the connective tissue holding it together. But she was young and junior, and Thaxor was dismissing her concerns. She returned to her office and continued tracking the deteriorating situations. Each day brought new problems. Small conflicts that had been quietly managed for years suddenly exploded. Infrastructure that humans had maintained began failing. Trade agreements that humans had negotiated with careful attention to cultural sensitivities collapsed into disputes. The pattern was undeniable. Humans had been the scaffolding supporting council cooperation. Remove them, and the structure wobbled. Chairman Vexthor finally acknowledged the scope of the problem during a closed council session. We are facing multiple simultaneous crises, he announced. This is manageable, but we must coordinate our responses better. But coordination had never been the council's strength. Each species pursued its own interests. The only thing that had made them cooperate was patient human mediation, cultural translation, and relationship building. That patience was gone now. In her small office, Kai updated her analysis. The trend lines all pointed downward. Disease spread, conflicts escalated, economies struggled, and they were only 14 months into humanity's absence. They were the scaffolding, she whispered to herself, staring at the data. And we never noticed because scaffolding is supposed to be invisible. She wondered if the council would realize the truth before everything collapsed completely. Then she looked at the latest reports. The Vryn and Heptari were moving fleets into position. 6 more worlds had plague outbreaks, and food riots had started on 3 colony worlds. The answer seemed obvious. They would realize the truth. But by then, it would be far too late. The Vryn-Heptari War began on a Tuesday morning, Council Standard Time. 300,000 people died in the first month. By the second month, the death toll had doubled. Chairman Vexthor convened emergency sessions, demanding both sides cease hostilities. Neither side listened. The Vryn claimed the Heptari had violated trade agreements. The Heptari claimed the Vryn had encroached on their territory. Both sides were probably right. Without patient mediation to manage their grievances over the years, resentments had built until war seemed inevitable. "This is unacceptable," Vexthor roared at the council assembly. "We are supposed to be a civilization of peaceful cooperation." Then where were the mediators to maintain that peace? A Heptari representative shot back. "You dismissed human mediation services as unnecessary. Now we handle disputes the old way, with weapons." The council session dissolved into shouting matches. Other species with their own border disputes watched the Vryn-Heptari War closely, making calculations about their own conflicts. If the council couldn't stop this war, what authority did it really have? Within months, 3 more conflicts erupted across council space. The diseases that human medical teams had contained spread faster than anyone had anticipated. The Talix 4 plague jumped to 6 more systems, then 12, then 20. Quarantine efforts failed because no one had maintained the contact tracing networks that humans had built. Governor Thexan sent increasingly desperate messages. "We need Dr. Su Yan's team. We need people who understand disease propagation modeling. Our doctors are overwhelmed." But Dr. Su Yan was on Earth, working in human hospitals, treating human patients. She had offered her expertise to the council for 50 years. They had made it clear such expertise was not valued. The agricultural crisis deepened into famine. 14 colony worlds became 28, then 45. People went hungry. Then they started dying. Food riots broke out. Colony governments collapsed. Refugees flooded into neighboring systems, overwhelming stations and planets that were already struggling with their own problems. The refugee crisis exposed another gap left by departing humans. For decades, human aid workers had coordinated disaster relief across council space. They had built networks, established protocols, and trained local response teams. But those networks depended on constant maintenance and experienced leadership. Without human coordination, relief efforts became chaotic. Ships arrived with supplies, but no distribution plans. Medical aid went to wrong locations. Refugee camps formed without sanitation infrastructure. More diseases spread. Analyst Kai, now promoted to senior advisor due to the crisis, presented her updated findings to the full council. The numbers were devastating. "We identified 40,000 positions that humans held," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Every single area where humans withdrew is now experiencing critical failures. Disease containment, agricultural management, conflict mediation, refugee coordination, trade negotiation, infrastructure maintenance. The list continues." "Why didn't we know about this dependency?" a Talixian counselor demanded. "Because human work was preventive," Kai replied. "They stopped problems before they started. We only notice prevention when it's gone and problems emerge." Chairman Vexthor looked older than he had 2 years ago. His scales had dulled, his posture less confident. "Recommendations?" "We need to bring humans back," Kai said simply. "We need their expertise, their mediation skills, their systematic approach to prevention." Several species objected immediately. "We cannot show such weakness," a Kryn military commander insisted. "Begging the humans to return will make us look foolish." "We already look foolish," Kai replied sharply. We dismissed their contributions as unimportant. We mocked their focus on cooperation and prevention. Now we're dying because of our arrogance. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford." The debate lasted for hours. Eventually, the Council voted to send envoys to human space, requesting humanity's return. The vote passed with only 3 dissenting voices. The envoys included representatives from 12 species. Kai was among them, as was former Governor Thexan, who had lost 2 of his children to the plague. Chairman Vexthor did not go himself, though he drafted the official message requesting human assistance. The journey to human space took 3 weeks. When they arrived, the envoys found something unexpected. Human worlds were thriving, cities gleamed, agricultural regions produced abundant harvests, medical centers operated efficiently. No wars, no famines, no plagues. Humanity had not collapsed without the Council. Instead, they had flourished. Ambassador Minjae agreed to meet the envoys at a diplomatic facility on Luna. She looked the same as she had 2 years ago, calm and measured. But there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Ambassador Minjae," Thexan began, his voice breaking, "we were wrong. We didn't understand what your people were doing for us. We need you to come back. Please." Minjae listened as each envoy spoke. They described the wars, the plagues, the famines. They admitted their mistakes. Some wept openly. The pride that had prevented them from valuing human work had crumbled under the weight of catastrophe. When they finished, Minjae remained silent for a long moment. "I want you to understand something," she said finally. "We don't hold grudges. We're not angry at the Council. We're just sad that it took so much death for you to see what we were offering." "Then you'll return?" one envoy asked hopefully. Minjae shook her head slowly. "No, we won't return." The envoys reacted with shock and desperation. "But you said you don't hold grudges," Thexan protested. "We don't," Minjae confirmed. "But we learned an important lesson over the past 2 years. We learned that our efforts weren't valued, that the work we did, the patient daily work of building relationships and preventing problems, was seen as weak and unnecessary. We can't go back to that." "We value it now," Kai said urgently. "We understand what you were doing. We'll support human programs, fund them properly, listen to your expertise." "You value it now because you're in crisis," Minjae replied gently. "But what happens when the immediate crises pass? Will you still value prevention when there's no dramatic emergency to solve? Will you still respect the patient, quiet work of maintaining peace and health?" She gestured to a screen showing news from Council space. Wars, diseases, collapse. "This is what happens when you only value flashy, immediate solutions. We spent 50 years showing you a different way. You rejected it. We can't keep offering something you're not ready to receive." "What should we do?" Thexan asked, his voice hollow. Minjae's expression softened. "Learn to do what we did. Learn patience. Learn to value prevention as much as response. Learn that the hardest work is often the quietest work. We built thousands of manuals, protocols, and training guides. We'll share them all with you, freely." "But without human expertise to implement them," Kai began. "Then you'll struggle," Minjae interrupted. "You'll fail many times. People will die while you learn. That's the cost of dismissing teachers before you've learned their lessons." The envoys returned to Council space with humanity's accumulated knowledge, but without the humans themselves. It was, as one envoy noted bitterly, like being given a library about swimming but not being rescued from drowning. Chairman Vexthor received their report in silence. Then he did something unprecedented. He stood before the full Council and admitted failure. "We destroyed something precious through our arrogance," he said, "and we will pay for that mistake for generations." 4 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council existed only in name. The unified body that had once governed 47 species had fractured into 7 regional blocks. 3 of those blocks were openly hostile to each other. The rest maintained cold, suspicious neutrality. The death toll had stopped climbing only because there were fewer people left to die. 3 million casualties from various wars, another 2 million from plagues and famines, entire colony worlds abandoned. Trade routes collapsed. The grand civilization that had thought itself so advanced had regressed centuries in less than 5 years. Chairman Vexthor called a meeting of what remained of the Central Council. Only 19 species sent representatives. The chamber that had once been filled with voices from dozens of worlds now felt empty and cold. Vexthor looked ancient. His scales had faded to a dull gray. He moved slowly, each gesture showing his exhaustion, but his voice, when he spoke, carried a clarity born from bitter experience. "We destroyed ourselves," he said simply, "not through war or plague or any external threat. We destroyed ourselves by failing to recognize what held us together." The assembled representatives sat in silence. There was no point in arguing. Everyone present had lost something. Homeworlds damaged by war. Family members dead from disease, economies shattered. The evidence of their collective failure surrounded them. "The humans showed us a different path," Vexthor continued. "For 50 years, they demonstrated that patience, cooperation, and prevention were strengths, not weaknesses. We mocked them for it. We dismissed their work as simple, their methods as soft. We were fools." A Talixian representative, one of Governor Thexen's successors, spoke up. "We have the human manuals and protocols, thousands of documents explaining their methods, but implementing them is proving difficult." That was an understatement. The Council had attempted to follow human procedures for disease monitoring, conflict mediation, and agricultural management. Progress was painfully slow. Systems that humans had operated smoothly required constant adjustment when other species tried to run them. What had seemed simple when humans did it turned out to be extraordinarily complex. Analyst Kai, now senior coordinator for reconstruction efforts, addressed the Council. "The problem isn't the procedures themselves, it's the mindset behind them. Human methods require daily attention, long-term thinking, and patience. Our species are trained to value dramatic action and immediate results. Changing that cultural perspective takes time." "How much time?" someone asked. "Generations," Kai replied honestly. "We're essentially relearning how to cooperate from the ground up. The humans spent centuries developing their approaches to conflict resolution and preventive care. We're trying to adopt those methods without the cultural foundation that created them." The Vryn-Heptari War had finally ended after 18 months of bloodshed, not through any peace agreement, but through simple exhaustion. Both sides had depleted their resources and populations to the point where continued fighting became impossible. The ceasefire that followed was bitter and fragile. Commander Caxiel, now promoted to High Commander due to the deaths of his superiors, served as the Vryn representative. "We tried to implement human-style mediation between our species and the Heptari. We failed repeatedly. Do you know why? Because mediation requires trust, and trust requires relationship building, and relationships take years to develop. Ambassador A. Cha spent 8 years building that trust. We tried to replicate it in 8 weeks. Are you suggesting we give up on human methods? A counselor asked. No, Caxiel replied firmly. I'm suggesting we accept that there are no shortcuts. The humans understood something we didn't. That preventing a war is harder than fighting one. That building a relationship is harder than signing a treaty. That the most important work is often the least visible. The discussion continued for hours. Slowly, painfully, the remaining council members agreed on a framework. They would rebuild from the bottom up, focusing on human principles, long-term thinking, preventive action, relationship building, and patience. It would take decades, possibly centuries. Many present would not live to see the results. But what choice did they have? The alternative was continued collapse. Kai proposed sending one more message to humanity. Not requesting their return, she clarified quickly, but thanking them for the knowledge they've shared and updating them on our reconstruction efforts, and perhaps asking for guidance when we encounter specific problems. The council debated this carefully. Pride still ran deep, even in their diminished state, but eventually they agreed. The message would be sent. On Earth, Ambassador Minjae received the council's transmission. She read it carefully, noting the changes in tone from their previous communications. Less arrogance, more humility, actual acknowledgement of the scale of human contributions and the difficulty of replicating them. She called a meeting of the Human Diplomatic Corps. Dozens of faces appeared on screens. Dr. Su Yan, Agricultural Specialist Hyun Woo, Trade Negotiator Cha. All the people who had spent decades working for the Council, only to have their efforts dismissed. The Council sent a message, Minjae told them. They're attempting to implement our methods. They're struggling. They're asking for guidance, not demanding our return. Do we help them? Su-Yan asked. That's what we need to decide, Minjae replied. The discussion lasted for hours. Some argued that the Council had made its choice and needed to live with the consequences. Others felt that humanity's values of compassion and cooperation meant helping even those who had rejected help before. Finally, Hyun-Woo spoke. We left because our work wasn't valued, but we didn't do the work for appreciation. We did it because it needed doing, because we believed in cooperation and prevention. If we refuse to help now out of wounded pride, aren't we becoming what we criticized them for being? The question hung in the air. Minjae felt its weight. They had left to protect their dignity and to teach the Council a hard lesson. That lesson had been learned at a terrible cost, but continuing to withhold help would make them complicit in ongoing suffering. We'll offer guidance, Minjae decided, but not by returning to Council space. We'll provide detailed responses to their questions. We'll offer training programs here on Earth for those willing to learn. We'll share additional resources. But we maintain our boundaries. We won't go back to being taken for granted. The consensus formed around this middle path. Help without returning to old patterns. Support without sacrifice. Minjae composed a response to the Council. Humanity acknowledges your message and respects your efforts to rebuild. We will provide guidance as you request it. We hope you succeed in creating something stronger and more sustainable than what existed before. She paused before adding the final paragraph. You didn't value what we offered when we stood beside you. Perhaps you'll value it now that you must do the work yourselves. That's not cruelty speaking. That's the simple truth that people rarely appreciate gifts they haven't earned through effort. 4 more years passed. The Council's reconstruction efforts showed slow progress. Some areas improved, others regressed. The path forward remained uncertain and difficult. On Luna, Minjae stood at an observation window, watching Earth rotate slowly below. News feeds showed updates from Council space, careful peace negotiations between former enemies, disease monitoring systems gradually improving, agricultural yields recovering in some regions. It would take generations for the Council to rebuild what had been lost, if they ever truly did. Her assistant Jiwoo, now deputy ambassador, joined her at the window. Do you think they'll make it? Minjae considered the question carefully. I think they have a chance. They're learning the right lessons, even if it's painful. They understand now that strength isn't just military power or advanced technology. Real strength is the daily work of maintaining peace, preventing problems, and building relationships. It cost millions of lives for them to learn that lesson. Yes, Minjae agreed quietly. That's the price of arrogance. Of dismissing quiet strength as weakness. Of valuing dramatic action over patient prevention. She thought about all the human workers who had spent decades in council space, doing necessary work that was never appreciated until it was gone. She thought about Governor Thexan's children, dead from a plague that could have been prevented, about the soldiers killed in wars that could have been mediated, about the families that starved when famines could have been avoided. "We showed them a better way," she said finally. "They rejected it. Now they're learning it again through suffering. I hope they succeed. I genuinely do. But I can't regret that we left." Jiwoo nodded. "We found our own peace." And they had. Human worlds flourished. Human communities grew stronger. Freed from the burden of holding together a council that didn't value their efforts, humans focused on their own development. They built societies based on cooperation, prevention, and long-term thinking. The principles that the council had dismissed as weak. Perhaps someday the council would rebuild into something worthy of partnership. Perhaps humans would return to galactic politics when their methods were truly valued. But that day remained distant. For now, humanity had learned its own lesson. That you cannot save people who don't believe they need saving. That you cannot give gifts to those who don't recognize value. That sometimes the kindest thing to do is step back and let others learn through experience, no matter how painful that experience might be. Min-jae turned from the window, back to her work coordinating Earth's thriving communities. Behind her, the galaxy struggled with lessons humanity had tried to teach. Ahead of her, human civilization built something new. The Council had faced the ruin it created. Now it had to find its own way forward. And humanity, having left in quiet, would watch from a distance, offering guidance, but never again sacrificing themselves for those who could not see their worth.